The boots were the first thing people noticed about Penelope Barrett when she walked into the general store that scorching July morning in 1878, and they were not kind about it. "Look at that," Martha Henderson whispered loudly enough for half the store to hear. "James has been dead 3 months, and she's already stealing his boots right off his corpse." Penelope kept her chin high as she walked past the gathering of women near the fabric section, the heavy leather boots making solid, deliberate sounds against the wooden floor. She'd learned long ago that responding only made things worse. The truth was simpler and sadder than any of their gossip. Her own boots had fallen apart 2 weeks ago, torn beyond repair after stepping on a rusted nail while trying to fix the chicken coop fence. James's boots were all she had left that would protect her feet while she worked the small property on the outskirts of Shafter, Texas. "Unnatural, that's what it is," another voice chimed in, belonging to Alina Prout, the banker's wife. "A proper woman would find another way." Penelope grabbed the flour from the shelf, then the salt and sugar, calculating each purchase against the dwindling coins in her pocket. The ranch, if you could even call their 5 acres that, barely produced enough to keep her fed. James had died trying to change that, breaking his neck when his horse spooked during a storm. One moment he was riding out to check on their cattle, all 4 of them, and the next he was gone, leaving her alone at 24 years old with nothing but debt and judgment. "I need these supplies on credit, Mr. Jameson," she said quietly when she reached the counter, hating how small her voice sounded. The shopkeeper, a rail-thin man with a perpetual frown, shook his head. "Your account is already overextended, Mrs. Barrett. I cannot give you more credit until you pay what you owe. I have crops coming in next month. I can pay you then." "That's what you said last month." Heat crept up Penelope's neck, and she was acutely aware of every eye in the store watching this humiliation unfold. "Please, I need these things." "Perhaps if you sold those boots instead of parading around in them like some kind of ranch hand, you would have money for food," Alina called from across the store, and several women tittered in agreement. Penelope set the items down carefully, keeping her hands steady though they wanted to shake. "Keep them," she said to Mr. Jameson, then turned and walked out of the store, those boots carrying her back into the brutal Texas heat. She stood on the wooden walkway for a moment, trying to decide what to do next. The sun beat down mercilessly, and dust devils danced in the street. A wagon rolled by, and she recognized the driver, Samuel Porter, who'd been friends with James. He looked away quickly, as if her widowhood might be contagious. The walk back to her property was 3 miles, and by the time she reached the small, weathered house, sweat had soaked through her dress. The vegetable garden she'd tried to maintain was struggling, the plants wilting despite her best efforts. The cattle had gotten out again, she noticed, probably through the same gap in the fence she'd attempted to patch last week. Penelope sat down hard on the porch steps, pulled off her bonnet, and let herself feel the full weight of her situation. She had no family left. Her parents had died of fever when she was 16, and James had been an only child raised by an aunt who passed before they married. She had no money, no credit, and apparently no sympathy from anyone in town. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up. A tall man on a chestnut mare was riding up the path to her house, leading 2 of her cattle on a rope. She didn't recognize him at first, backlit as he was by the afternoon sun. But as he drew closer, she realized with a start that she did know who he was, at least by reputation. Nathan Kane owned the largest ranch in the area, nearly 2,000 acres sprawling to the west of town. She'd never spoken to him directly, but everyone knew the Kane name. He'd built his operation from nothing over the past 10 years, arriving in Shafter as a young man with just enough money to buy land, nobody else wanted, and turning it into something profitable through sheer determination and long hours. He was probably in his early 30s now, with the kind of weathered face that came from years under the Texas sun. "These are yours," he said as he stopped in front of her porch, his voice deep and matter-of-fact. "Found them near my water supply." Penelope stood quickly, embarrassment flooding through her again. "I'm so sorry. The fence has a break in it and I've been trying to fix it, but I cannot seem to get it right." He dismounted in one smooth motion and tied both horses to her porch rail. Up close, she could see his eyes were a startling light brown, almost golden in the sunlight. He wore work clothes like any ranch hand, though the quality was better, and there was an ease about him that spoke of confidence. "Where's the break?" he asked. "You don't need to trouble yourself." "I can handle it." He glanced at her, one eyebrow raised slightly. "I'm sure you can, but if they keep ending up on my land, it becomes my trouble too. Might as well fix it properly." There was no mockery in his tone, no judgment, just simple practicality. Penelope found herself nodding. "It's on the eastern side, near the old oak." Nathan walked in that direction without waiting for her, and she hurried to follow, her borrowed boots kicking up small clouds of dust. When they reached the fence, he examined the gap in silence, then tested the posts on either side. "These posts are rotted through," he said. "That's your real problem. You can patch the wire all you want, but without solid posts it won't hold." "I don't have money for new posts." He straightened and looked at her directly. "I have some extra at my place. I'll bring them by tomorrow with some men to help set them right." "I cannot pay you." "Did I ask for payment?" Penelope crossed her arms, defensive. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Nathan was quiet for a moment, his gaze steady. "Your husband bought a bull calf from me 2 years ago. He was honest in his dealings and he worked hard. I respect that. And I don't see any reason why his widow should suffer because she doesn't have the resources to maintain her property. The people in town think I'm foolish for trying to stay here alone. The people in town think a lot of things. Doesn't make them right." He glanced down at her boots, and she felt herself tense, waiting for the comment, the mockery. But when he looked back up, there was something almost like approval in his expression. "Those are good boots. Practical. Better than ruining your feet trying to work in ladies' shoes." Something tight in Penelope's chest loosened slightly. "That's what I thought." "I'll be back tomorrow around midday," he said, then walked back to his horse. He mounted easily, tipped his hat to her, and rode off with her cattle trailing behind on the rope. Penelope watched him go, feeling off balance. She couldn't remember the last time someone had offered help without expecting something in return, or without making her feel smaller for needing it. That evening, she managed to catch a rabbit in one of James's old snares and made a thin stew with the last of her vegetables. As she ate alone at the small table, she thought about Nathan Kane's unexpected kindness and wondered what it meant. Probably nothing, she told herself. He was simply being a good neighbor, the way people were supposed to be. But the next day, when the sun was high and hot, he arrived as promised with 2 ranch hands and a wagon full of fence posts. Penelope had spent the morning trying to make herself and the property presentable, though there was only so much she could do with no supplies and no money. She'd swept the porch and pulled weeds from the garden, at least. Nathan and his men worked efficiently, digging out the old posts and setting new ones deep in the ground. Penelope watched from the porch, feeling useless, until she decided to draw water from the well and bring them all drinks. It was the least she could do. "Thank you, madam," one of the ranch hands said, a young man with red hair and sunburned cheeks. The other man, older and grizzled, nodded his thanks but didn't speak. Nathan drank deeply, then handed the cup back. "You have any other fence sections that need attention?" "Several," Penelope admitted, "but this is already too much. I cannot ask for more." "You didn't ask. I'm offering." He wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "If you're going to keep this place running, you need proper fences. Otherwise, you'll spend all your time chasing livestock instead of doing the work that actually makes money." "What work would that be?" The question came out more bitter than she intended. "I have 4 cattle, a failed garden, and no prospects." Nathan studied her for a long moment. "You have land. That's more than a lot of people have. What did your husband plan to do with it?" "He wanted to run cattle, but we never had enough money to buy a proper herd. These 4 were all we could afford." "Can you ride?" The question surprised her. "Yes. My father taught me when I was young." "Can you handle cattle?" "I've done it before, though not often." Nathan nodded slowly, as if making a decision. "I need extra help with a drive next week. I'm moving about 200 head to new grazing land on the northern part of my property. It's hard work, and I'll pay fair wages. $2 a day for 5 days of work." Penelope's breath caught. $10 was more money than she'd seen in months, but the offer felt too convenient, too much like charity dressed up as work. "You don't need to do this." "I need workers, and you need money. That's not charity, that's business." He pulled his hat off and ran a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "Look, Mrs. Barrett, I know how it is to struggle. When I first came here, I had nothing. People helped me when they didn't have to, and I wouldn't have made it without them. I'm not offering you anything I wouldn't offer any capable person who needed work. The town will talk. The town talks anyway." He settled his hat back on his head. "Question is, do you care more about their gossip or about feeding yourself?" Put that way, the answer was obvious. "When do I start?" "Next Monday at dawn. Can you be at my ranch by sunup?" "I'll be there." He almost smiled, just a slight quirk of his mouth. "Wear those boots, you'll need them." After Nathan and his men finished with the fence and left, Penelope stood in her yard and felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. It was fragile and tentative, but it was there, a small flame against the darkness that had surrounded her since James died. The following Monday, she woke before dawn and dressed in her most practical clothes. A split riding skirt she'd made herself years ago, a simple cotton shirt, and James's boots. She braided her dark hair tightly and covered it with her bonnet, then walked the 5 miles to the Kane Ranch in the pre-dawn coolness. The Kane Ranch was impressive, even in the dim light. A large main house stood solid and well-maintained, flanked by a barn, several outbuildings, and an extensive system of corrals. Cattle dotted the visible landscape, and she could hear horses nickering from the barn. A half-dozen men were already saddling horses when she arrived, their faces barely visible in the gray light. Nathan emerged from the barn leading a gray mare. "You made it. Good." He gestured to the horse. "This is Sage. She's steady and knows how to work cattle. She'll take care of you if you take care of her." Penelope approached the mare carefully, letting the horse smell her hand before stroking her neck. "Hello, Sage. You'll ride with the swing position today," Nathan said, checking the saddle. "That's the middle of the herd. Your job is to keep them moving and watch for any that try to break away. If you see trouble, call out. Don't try to handle it alone." "I understand." He looked at her directly, and in the growing light she could see the concern in his eyes. "This isn't easy work, and these men have been doing it for years. Don't be ashamed to speak up if you need help or if you need to rest. Understood?" "Understood." The drive began with organized chaos. The cattle were already nervous from being gathered, and it took all the riders working together to get them moving in the right direction. Penelope found herself swept up in the rhythm of it, Sage responding to her commands as if they'd worked together for years. The mare seemed to know instinctively where she needed to be, and Penelope learned to trust the horse's judgment. The sun rose hot and relentless, and within hours, Penelope was covered in dust, her throat dry despite the water she'd brought. Her legs ached from gripping the saddle, and her back protested the constant movement. But she didn't complain, and she didn't fall behind. When a young steer tried to bolt from the herd, she managed to turn it back without calling for help, earning a nod of approval from one of the older ranch hands. Nathan rode up and down the length of the herd constantly, checking on everything, giving quiet instructions, occasionally moving cattle himself. He didn't single Penelope out for special attention, which she appreciated. She was being treated like any other worker, expected to do her job and do it well. When they finally stopped for a midday break, Penelope slid off Sage and had to grab the saddle to keep from falling, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. Nathan appeared at her elbow, his hand steady on her arm. "You all right?" "Fine," she managed. "Just need a moment. Drink water. Rest in the shade if you can find any. We've got another 4 hours ahead of us." The afternoon was even harder than the morning. The cattle were tired and cranky. The sun seemed determined to bake them all alive, and every muscle in Penelope's body screamed in protest. But she kept going, kept Sage moving, kept the cattle in line. When one of them stumbled and looked like it might go down, she was the one who noticed and called out, allowing Nathan and another hand to get the animal back on its feet before it was trampled. By the time they finally got the herd settled in their new grazing area and started the ride back to the ranch, the sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Penelope was so exhausted she could barely think, but there was also a deep satisfaction in knowing she'd completed the work. At the ranch, she dismounted stiffly and began to unsaddle Sage, her hands clumsy with fatigue. "I'll do that," Nathan said, appearing beside her. "You've done enough for today. I should take care of my horse, and you will tomorrow. Today you need rest." He took the reins gently but firmly. "There's supper in the main house. Go eat. I should get home. It's nearly dark and you're dead on your feet. I'm not letting you walk 5 miles in this condition." His tone left no room for argument. "You can sleep in the guest room tonight and head home in the morning." Penelope wanted to protest, wanted to maintain her independence, but the truth was she didn't think she could make it home. "Thank you." The inside of Nathan's house surprised her. She'd expected something rough and purely functional, but the main room was comfortable and well-appointed, with solid furniture and even some books on a shelf. A woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense expression was setting food on the table. "This is Maria," Nathan said. "She manages the house and cooks for the crew. Maria, this is Mrs. Barrett. She worked the drive today and needs supper and a place to sleep tonight." Maria looked Penelope up and down, taking in her dusty, sweat-stained appearance. "You did the drive, the whole thing?" "Yes, madam, good for you." Maria smiled, the expression transforming her stern face. "Sit, eat. You look like you're about to fall over." The food was simple but delicious. Beef stew, fresh bread, and strong coffee. Nathan sat across from her, eating in comfortable silence. The ranch hands ate at a longer table in the adjacent room, their conversation a low rumble. "You did well today," Nathan said finally. "Better than some men I've hired who claim to know cattle." Penelope felt warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Thank you. Sage made it easy." "Sage is a good horse, but she can't do the work for you. That was all you." He set down his spoon and looked at her seriously. "I meant what I said about fair wages. You did a full day's work, and you'll get a full day's pay. If you want to come back tomorrow, the job is yours for the rest of the week. I'll be here." The guest room was small but clean, with a real bed and fresh linens. Penelope barely managed to pull off her boots before she collapsed onto the mattress, her body sinking into the softness. She was asleep within seconds. The next 4 days followed the same pattern. Penelope arrived at dawn, worked the drive, ate supper at the main house, and slept in the guest room. Each day was brutally hard, but each day she also felt herself growing stronger, more confident. The ranch hands accepted her presence after the first day, and by the 3rd day, they were treating her like any other member of the crew, which felt like its own kind of victory. Nathan was a constant presence, always working, always aware of what was happening with the herd and the people. Penelope found herself watching him when she thought he wasn't looking, noticing the way he moved with easy grace, the way he treated his workers with respect, the way his face softened when he smiled, which wasn't often but was genuine when it happened. On the final day, when the work was done and she'd been paid her $10 in coins that felt heavy and precious in her hand, Nathan walked her to where Sage was saddled and waiting. "I already put your pay in your saddlebag," he said, "and Maria packed you some supplies. Food, mostly, but also some other things you might need." Penelope felt her throat tighten. "You've already paid me. You don't need to give me more. It's extra food we have. No sense in it going to waste." He checked Sage's saddle, though Penelope had already checked it herself. "Mrs. Barrett, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know you can say no without it affecting anything." "All right." He turned to face her, and she was struck again by those golden brown eyes. "I need a foreman for one of my line camps. It's on the eastern edge of my property, closest to your land. The job involves checking fence lines, monitoring the cattle in that section, and keeping the camp maintained. It's steady work, good pay, and there's a cabin that comes with it. You'd essentially be managing that portion of the ranch." Penelope stared at him. "That's a big responsibility." "It is, and I think you can handle it, but I'm a woman." I noticed. There was the hint of a smile. "I don't care about that. I care about whether you can do the job, and after watching you this week, I think you can. You're smart, you work hard, and you don't give up. That's what I need. The men won't respect me. The men will respect whoever I put in charge, or they'll find work elsewhere." His tone was firm. "I'm offering you this because I think you're the right person for it, not because I feel sorry for you. If you don't want it, that's fine. But don't turn it down because you're worried about what other people will think." Penelope looked down at her boots, the ones that had started all the gossip, the ones that represented everything the town thought was wrong with her. Then she looked back up at Nathan and realized something. She didn't want to just survive anymore. She wanted to live. She wanted to work and earn her keep and be someone in her own right. "I'll take the job." Nathan's smile was full and genuine this time. "Good. You can start Monday. I'll show you the camp and go over everything you need to know." Riding back to her small house that evening, Penelope felt like a different person than the desperate, humiliated woman who'd walked out of the general store just over a week ago. She had money in her pocket, food in her saddlebag, and a future that looked brighter than she dared hope. When she did go into town the following Saturday to pay her debts at the general store, she held her head high. Mr. Jameson counted the money twice, as if surprised she actually had it. "I'll be needing those supplies I tried to purchase last time," Penelope said clearly. "Plus a few other things." "Of course, Mrs. Barrett." His tone was much more respectful now. Eleanor Prout was there again, examining ribbons with 2 other women. They watched as Penelope made her purchases, their expressions curious and faintly disapproving. "I heard you've been working at the Kane ranch," Eleanor said, her voice carrying. "Riding with the men, doing men's work." Penelope met her gaze steadily. "I've been doing honest work for honest pay. Is there something wrong with that? It's just unusual. Unseemly, some might say." "Then they're welcome to their opinions." Penelope collected her packages. "Good day, ladies. As she walked out, she heard one of the other women whisper, "Can you imagine, working like a common ranch hand?" "I think it's shameful," Alina replied. "That woman has no sense of propriety." Penelope kept walking, the boots carrying her forward with steady, confident steps. Let them talk. She had work to do. The line camp turned out to be a pleasant surprise. It was a small but solid cabin with a stone fireplace, a real bed, a table, and even a rocking chair on the porch. The surrounding area was beautiful, with a creek running nearby and cottonwood trees providing shade. Nathan gave her a detailed tour of the fence lines she'd be responsible for, and showed her where the cattle in this section tended to gather. "You'll check the fences every few days," he explained. "Repair what you can yourself and send word if it's something bigger. Keep an eye on the cattle, watch for injuries or illness. Once a week, you'll ride to the main ranch and report on everything. If there's an emergency, fire 3 shots and someone will come. What about supplies?" "Maria will make sure you're stocked. There's a root cellar behind the cabin and the creek has good water. You'll be comfortable here." As the weeks turned into months, Penelope settled into her new life with a contentment she'd never known. The work was demanding but satisfying, and she was good at it. She learned to spot problems before they became serious, to doctor cattle with basic ailments, and to make repairs that held. The solitude didn't bother her. After years of trying to fit into a town that didn't want her, the quiet of the ranch was peaceful. Nathan rode out to check on her regularly, at first once a week as planned, but gradually more often. He'd arrive in the afternoon, check her work, and then stay for supper. Penelope found herself looking forward to these visits more than she wanted to admit. They'd sit on the porch as the sun set, talking about the ranch, about cattle, about the changes coming to Texas as more settlers arrived and the open range began to shrink. "You ever think about what happens next?" she asked one evening in October when the air had finally cooled and the heat of summer was just a memory. "When all the land is claimed and fenced," Nathan leaned back in the rocking chair, his long legs stretched out. "I think about it all the time. The big ranches will survive, the ones that adapted and bought land while they could. The small operations will struggle. It's going to be a different world. Do you think I made a mistake, taking this job instead of trying to build something of my own?" He looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Do you feel like you made a mistake?" "No, I feel like I'm finally doing something right." "Then that's your answer." He was quiet for a moment. "You know, you could still build something of your own. You're learning the business, earning money, making connections. When you're ready, you'll have options. Maybe." She rocked slowly, enjoying the comfortable silence that fell between them. It was easy to be quiet with Nathan, to just exist without needing to fill the space with words. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan's voice was casual, but there was something underneath it that made Penelope pay attention. "Of course. Why haven't you sold your old place, the property where you lived with your husband?" Penelope considered the question. "I suppose it feels like giving up. Like admitting that whole part of my life was a failure." Was it a failure? I don't know. James and I were happy, I think, or at least content, but we were always struggling, always one problem away from losing everything. And then he died, and I realized how precarious it all was. How precarious I was. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I'm not sure I want to go back to feeling that way, even if I could make it work." Nathan nodded slowly. "I understand that. When I first started the ranch, I was terrified every single day. Afraid I'd fail, afraid I'd lose everything, afraid I wasn't good enough to make it work. Took me years to feel secure. What changed? I did. I stopped being so afraid of failing that I couldn't see what I was building." He met her eyes. "You're not that desperate widow anymore, Penelope. You're a foreman for one of the largest ranches in the county. You're someone people respect, whether they want to admit it or not." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cooling air. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing that, for helping me become that. You did the work. I just gave you the opportunity." As the months progressed into winter and then early spring of 1879, the nature of Nathan's visits began to shift in ways both subtle and profound. He stayed longer, found more reasons to check on the line camp, and their conversations ranged far beyond ranch business. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Penelope learned that Nathan had grown up poor in Missouri, that his father had died in the war and his mother of heartbreak soon after, that he'd come to Texas with nothing but determination and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. "I never wanted to be poor again," he admitted one evening in March. "That's what drove me in the beginning, fear of going back to having nothing. And now I realize I built something good, but I built it alone, and maybe that wasn't the right choice." He looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Maybe I was so focused on securing my future that I forgot to think about what I wanted that future to actually be." Penelope's breath caught. "What do you want it to be?" Nathan stood and moved to the porch railing, looking out over the darkening landscape. "I want what I've been seeing when I come here. I want to ride up to a house and have someone waiting who's happy to see me. I want conversations and companionship and someone who understands this life because they're living it too." He turned to face her. "I want you, Penelope. I have for months now." She stood slowly, her heart pounding. "Nathan, I don't know if I'm ready. James has only been gone a year. I know. And I'm not asking you to be ready right now. I'm just telling you how I feel so you know, so you can think about it." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker brown in his golden eyes. "I love you. I love your strength and your determination, and the way you refuse to let the world tell you what you can and cannot be. I love how you look in those damn boots that everyone mocked you for, because they mean you're practical and brave enough not to care what people think." Tears welled in Penelope's eyes. "I care what you think. I think you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met." She closed the distance between them and let him pull her into an embrace, his arms strong and warm around her. It felt right in a way that surprised her, as if some part of her had been waiting for this without realizing it. "I don't know if I love you yet," she whispered against his chest, "but I think I'm getting there." She felt him smile against her hair. "That's all I need to know." They stood there on the porch as night fell completely, holding each other in the darkness, and Penelope felt something she hadn't experienced since before James died. She felt like she had a future worth looking forward to. Over the following weeks, Nathan's courtship was patient and thoughtful. He brought her books to read, knowing she loved stories. He consulted her opinion on ranch matters and listened when she spoke. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, content with conversation and the occasional stolen moment of closeness. The town, of course, noticed and had opinions. "I heard Nathan Kane is courting the Barrett widow," Martha Henderson told anyone who would listen at the church social in April. "Not even proper mourning period observed." "Well, what did you expect from a woman who wears men's boots?" Eleanor Prout replied. "She has no sense of decency." But there were other voices too, quieter but growing stronger. Maria spoke highly of Penelope to anyone who asked, and the ranch hands who worked with her spread word that she was a good foreman who knew her business. Samuel Porter, James's old friend, finally approached Penelope in town one day. "Mrs. Barrett, I owe you an apology," he said, removing his hat. "I should have helped you after James died, but I didn't know what to do and I was a coward. I'm glad to see you've made a good life for yourself." "Thank you, Mr. Porter. That means more than you know." By May, Penelope had come to a decision. She loved Nathan. She'd known it for certain one afternoon when he'd ridden up to the line camp soaking wet after being caught in a rainstorm, and her first thought wasn't concern for the horses or the property but pure relief that he was safe. Love felt different than it had with James, more mature and less desperate, built on genuine understanding rather than youthful hope. When Nathan arrived for supper that Friday evening, she met him on the porch before he could dismount. "I love you," she said simply. "I wanted you to know." His face transformed with joy, and he dismounted in one swift motion, gathering her into his arms and kissing her with a passion that made her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not because it's expected or because you need security. Marry me because you want to build a life together." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were married in June in the small church in Shafter, despite the disapproving whispers of some townspeople. Penelope wore a simple blue dress that Maria had helped her make, and on her feet, polished to a shine, were James's boots. She'd considered wearing something more traditional, but in the end, she decided those boots were part of her story, part of how she'd survived and ultimately thrived. They represented her journey from desperate widow to confident woman, and she wasn't going to hide them away. Nathan saw them as she walked down the aisle and smiled, that full, genuine smile she'd grown to love. When she reached him, he took her hand and whispered, "Those boots walked toward me, and I'm the luckiest man alive." The reception was held at the Kane Ranch, and to Penelope's surprise, most of the town showed up. Even a leaner prude came, though she still sniffed disapprovingly at the boots. But there were also people who congratulated her sincerely, who told her they admired her courage, who said she'd earned her happiness. "You showed them all wrong," Maria said, embracing her warmly. "You showed them a woman can make her own way." Their wedding night was sweet and tender, Nathan treating her with a gentleness that made her love him even more. The ranch house that had once felt like a place she was visiting became her home, though she still spent time at the line camp, now as part of managing their combined operations. Nathan had insisted on keeping her old property too, saying it could be something they built up together over time. The first year of their marriage was marked by hard work and deep happiness. They were partners in the truest sense, making decisions together, working side by side when needed, and building something that belonged to both of them. Penelope learned the full scope of the ranch business, and Nathan relied on her judgment in ways that made her feel valued and respected. In the spring of 1880, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She remembered the women in town who had died in childbirth, including her own mother, and fear clawed at her throat. Nathan held her close when she confessed her worries. "We'll get the best doctor and Maria will be there. You're strong, Penelope. You'll get through this. What if I don't? Then I'll raise our child with all the love we both feel and tell them every day about their remarkable mother." He kissed her forehead. "But you will get through it. You've survived everything else life has thrown at you. This will be no different." His confidence helped, and as the months passed and her belly grew, Penelope found herself becoming excited rather than just afraid. She wanted this child, wanted to bring new life into the world and raise them with the values she and Nathan shared. Hard work, determination, and the courage to be yourself regardless of what others thought. The baby, a boy they named James Nathan, was born in December during a cold snap that frosted the windows and made the world outside glitter with ice. The birth was long and difficult, but Penelope survived, and when the doctor placed her son in her arms, she wept with relief and overwhelming love. Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around her shoulders, staring at their son with wonder. He's perfect. He is. Penelope stroked the baby's soft cheek. Do you think we did right, naming him after James? I think we honored the man who was part of your journey to being here with me. That's right. Over the next few years, their family and their ranch both grew. A daughter, Caroline, was born in 1882, and another son, Thomas, arrived in 1884. The ranch prospered as Nathan and Penelope worked together to expand and improve it. They bought additional land, including Penelope's old property, which they converted into a homestead for families just starting out, offering them the same kind of chance Nathan had given Penelope. The town's attitude toward her had shifted completely. She was now Mrs. Kane, wife of the most successful rancher in the area and a respected figure in her own right. Young women who wanted to learn ranching sometimes came to her for advice, and she always helped when she could, remembering what it felt like to be alone and desperate. One afternoon in 1886, 8 years after that humiliating day in the general store, Penelope was in town with her children when she encountered Alina Prout on the walkway. "Mrs. Kane," Alina said, her tone much more respectful than it had ever been. "Your children are growing so beautifully." "Thank you, Mrs. Prout." Alina hesitated, then spoke more quietly. "I owe you an apology for the things I said about you years ago, about the boots and the work you did. I was wrong to judge you." Penelope looked at the woman who had once made her feel so small and realized she felt no anger, only a kind of pity for how limited Alina's worldview had been. "We all do the best we can with what we know at the time. I survived and I'm happy. That's what matters. You did more than survive. You thrived. I should have seen your strength instead of criticizing your methods." After Alina left, little Caroline tugged on her mother's skirt. "Mama, why was that lady talking about boots?" Penelope smiled and picked up her daughter. "That's a long story, sweetheart. I'll tell you when you're older." But that evening, after the children were in bed, she told Nathan about the encounter as they sat on their porch, the same comfortable silence between them as always. "You still have those boots?" Nathan asked. "Of course. They're in the chest in our bedroom." "Good. Keep them. They're part of our story." He took her hand. "The story of how the most stubborn, brave woman I ever met walked toward me in men's boots and changed my life forever." Penelope leaned against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. "I was so afraid that day in the store. So humiliated and alone. I never imagined it would lead to this. Life has a way of surprising us. You took what could have broken you and used it to build something better." "We built something better," she corrected. "Together." As the years continued to pass, Nathan and Penelope became pillars of the Shafter community. They employed dozens of people on their ranch, treating workers fairly and paying good wages. They sponsored scholarships for young people who wanted to learn ranching or other trades. They opened their home for community gatherings and helped neighbors who fell on hard times, always remembering what it felt like to struggle. Their children grew up strong and confident, raised by parents who loved each other deeply, and taught by example that hard work and integrity mattered more than what other people thought. James, their oldest, showed an early aptitude for managing cattle and land. Caroline was fascinated by horses and became an exceptional rider. Thomas loved the business side of ranching, always asking questions about costs and profits and planning. In 1890, when James was 10, he found the boots in the chest one day and brought them to his mother. "Mama, why do you have men's boots?" Penelope took them from him, the leather worn but still solid, and she told her children the whole story. She told them about being a widow with nothing, about the mockery and judgment, about wearing these boots because they were all she had and refusing to be ashamed. She told them about their father riding up to return her cattle, and how he'd looked at these boots with approval instead of scorn. She told them about the work and the struggle and the love that had grown from mutual respect. "Those boots saved your mother's life," Nathan added, sitting with them in the parlor. "Because they made her brave enough to do what she needed to do, and brave enough to walk toward me when the time came." "Can I try them on?" Caroline asked, always the most adventurous of the three. Penelope helped her daughter into the boots, which were far too large but which Caroline wore with pride anyway, clomping around the room as her brothers laughed. "Someday, when you're grown, you might face a time when people tell you that you cannot do something because you're a woman," Penelope said to her daughter. "When that happens, I want you to remember these boots and remember that the right choice is the one that helps you survive and thrive, regardless of what anyone else says." "I will, Mama." That night, as Penelope and Nathan lay in bed, he pulled her close. "You were wonderful with them today." The story, the lesson, all of it. I want them to understand that life isn't always easy, but you can survive anything if you're willing to do what needs to be done. They'll remember they have your strength and your determination. He kissed her softly. 20 years ago, if someone had told me I'd have this life, this family, this love, I wouldn't have believed them. I thought success meant land and cattle and money. I didn't know it meant you. Penelope felt tears prick her eyes, still moved by his words after all these years together. "I love you. I loved you when I was standing on that porch in the boots everyone mocked, waiting for you to tell me I was foolish. But you didn't. You saw me instead. I saw the woman I wanted to spend my life with. I just had to wait for you to be ready to see me too." As they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, Penelope thought about the journey that had brought them here. From desperate widow to confident wife and mother, from struggling alone to building an empire with her partner, from shame about a pair of boots to pride in what they represented. The ranch continued to thrive into the new century. When the drought of 1893 hit, devastating many smaller operations, the Kane Ranch survived because of careful planning and diversification. They helped their neighbors when they could, extending credit and offering work, remembering how important such help had been to them once. In 1895, on their 17th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Penelope with a gift. When she unwrapped it, she found a beautiful pair of custom-made leather boots, sized perfectly for her feet with delicate tooling along the sides. "They're beautiful," she breathed. "You've been wearing my old work boots around the ranch," Nathan said with a smile. "I thought you deserved boots of your own, practical but pretty, just like you." Penelope tried them on and found they fit perfectly. She wore them the next day to ride out and check on the cattle, and they were comfortable and sturdy and everything she needed. But she kept James's old boots too, safely stored in the chest, a reminder of where she'd started and how far she'd come. Their children grew into adults who made them proud. James took over more of the day-to-day ranch management, showing a natural talent for leadership. Caroline married a young rancher from a neighboring property, a good man who respected her skills and opinions. Thomas went to school to study business and returned to help modernize the ranch's operations. As Nathan and Penelope grew older, they began to slow down, letting the next generation take on more responsibility. But they remained active and engaged, offering advice when asked and enjoying the fruits of their decades of labor. One evening in 1905, 27 years after they'd first met, Penelope and Nathan sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Penelope's hair was more gray than dark now, and Nathan moved a bit slower than he used to, but the love between them was as strong as ever. "You remember the first time I rode up here to return your cattle?" Nathan asked, taking her hand. "Every detail. I was sitting on the porch of that little house, feeling sorry for myself and wondering how I was going to survive. And now look at you, look at us, look at everything we've built." Penelope squeezed his hand. "I never thought I'd be this happy. After James died, I thought that was it for me. Just survival until I couldn't anymore. I'm glad you were wrong." "Me too." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for seeing past the boots to the woman wearing them. Thank you for being brave enough to wear them in the first place. If you'd given in to what everyone expected, we might never have found each other." They sat in peaceful silence as night fell, surrounded by the land they'd worked and the legacy they'd built together. The ranch would continue through their children and grandchildren, but more than that, they'd built a life of love and partnership that had weathered every storm. In 1908, Nathan fell ill with pneumonia and passed away peacefully in their bed, surrounded by family. Penelope held his hand as he took his last breath, tears streaming down her face but also gratitude in her heart for the nearly 30 years they'd had together. "You saved me," she whispered to him. "You saw me when no one else would, and you loved me when I didn't think I deserved it. Thank you for every moment." After Nathan's death, Penelope continued to live on the ranch, supported by her children but remaining independent and sharp-minded. She became something of a legend in Shafter, the widow who'd refused to give up, who'd worn men's boots and worked like a hand and ended up building an empire with the man who'd loved her for it. Young women came to talk to her, asking for advice about their own struggles. Penelope always welcomed them, always shared her story, always encouraged them to be brave enough to do what needed to be done. Regardless of judgment, one day in 1912, a young widow came to see her, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what to do," the woman said. "I have nothing, and everyone says I should just remarry quickly or go live with relatives who don't want me." Penelope, now 70 years old but still strong, took the young woman's hands. "What do you want to do?" "I want to stay on my land. I want to make it work, but I don't know how." "Then I'll teach you, and I'll help you get started." Penelope smiled. 34 years ago, I was sitting where you are now, desperate and alone. Someone helped me when they didn't have to, and it changed my life. Let me do the same for you." And she did, finding work for the young widow on the ranch, teaching her the skills she needed, and eventually helping her establish her own small operation. It was what Nathan would have wanted, Penelope knew, and it felt right to pass on the gift she'd been given. Penelope lived to be 82 years old, remaining active and engaged until the very end. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1924, she was surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who adored her. The funeral was packed with people whose lives she'd touched, directly or indirectly, over the decades. In her will, she left specific instructions. James's old boots, the ones that had started everything, were to be preserved and kept in the family as a reminder of where they'd come from and what they'd overcome. Her own custom boots were to be given to Caroline, who'd always admired them. But more than material possessions, Penelope left a legacy of courage and determination. She'd shown that a woman could stand alone, could do hard work, could build something lasting. She'd proven that love could grow from respect and partnership, that judgment and mockery didn't have to define you, and that sometimes the worst moments of your life could lead to the best. Years later, Caroline would tell her own grandchildren the story of how their great-grandmother had been mocked for wearing men's boots after being widowed, how she'd been desperate and alone with no prospects. She'd tell them about Nathan Kane riding up to return some cattle, and how he'd looked at those boots with approval instead of scorn. She'd repeat his words, which had become family legend. "Those boots walk toward me." And she'd explain how that simple act of seeing past society's expectations to the person underneath had sparked a love story that lasted decades and built a legacy that would endure for generations. How two people who'd both known struggle and loneliness had found each other and created something beautiful together. The boots themselves remained in the family, carefully preserved, a tangible reminder of a time when one woman's choice to be practical instead of proper led to a life she never could have imagined. They represented courage and survival, but also love and partnership, and the power of being seen for who you truly are. In Shafter, Texas, the Kane name remained synonymous with quality ranching and fair dealing. The ranch continued to operate successfully, managed by descendants who'd inherited both the land and the values that Penelope and Nathan had instilled. The story of the widow and her boots became part of local folklore, told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the things that bring us shame or mockery are the very things that lead us to our destiny. And somewhere in the family archive, carefully preserved in a glass case, sat a pair of worn leather boots, too large for the woman who'd worn them, scuffed from hard work, but polished with care and respect. They stood as a testament to a love story that began with judgment and ended with joy, to a woman who refused to give up, and to a man who had the wisdom to see her strength instead of her struggles. Those boots had walked through humiliation and hardship, through honest labor and growing love, through the building of a life and a legacy. They'd walked toward a future that had seemed impossible on that hot day in 1878 when Penelope had fled the general store in shame. But most importantly, those boots had walked toward Nathan Kane, the rancher who'd looked at them and seen not something to mock, but something to admire. The boots of a survivor, a fighter, a woman worthy of love and respect. And in walking toward him, they'd carried Penelope into a life beyond her wildest dreams, proving that sometimes the path to happiness starts with a single brave step in borrowed boots that everyone says you shouldn't be wearing at all.